Can we talk briefly about the importance and the need of policies? And specifically, if you're a small, medium business, for example, what kinds of policies you need to really be developing within your organization to protect yourself?
So security policy is what we consider an administrative control. I mean, there are different categories, and sometimes I feel security or IT professionals lean too hard on the technical controls. I mean, they're invaluable, they're very important, but they are not all-encompassing. And you have to have different controls in different places where appropriate. And administrative controls really help inform operational procedures. I like to start at the top, at the executive level, not just for that executive buy-in and for that support of security initiatives, but it's almost like a role model. It sets the tone for how should departmental policies be set up.
Hierarchical.
Because a good organization isn't micromanaging every vertical's policies. They're trusting their people to do it correctly. Well, you should also trust them that they've incorporated security in place. Doesn't mean you shouldn't verify, but giving them that framework at the top of follow these processes, encourage and consider these. I love it when a group or a department head comes to me and asks, hey, are we backing up my data? And it's like, I'm glad you asked. Let's look and see. I don't know what you need necessarily.
Disaster recovery policy. Now, that's one that screams that we should have something laid out clearly. I mean, and I'm not going to ask you to pick and choose which policies are not relevant, because that's not really fair.
It's kind of a loaded question.
Yeah.
It's one that needs to be asked, though.
Yeah. What kind of policies do you think are the bleeding policies? The ones that really need to have attention, up and center.
Yeah, the most critical ones are the ones surrounding data and data access. So recovery is a key part of that. Classification,
right.
Who should have access to what, and how it should be stored and for how long. It's not just a security issue, it can potentially be a legal one. Now, I'm not a lawyer, I'm going to make that statement right up front, but my understanding is that if your policy states how long you should be keeping data, generally that's all you can be held to a standard of for example, discovery or presentation of documentation. Now, there are regulatory things that will supersede that. HIPAA, I believe, is 7 years minimum.
It is.
And you can always go above and beyond. But is it worth it necessarily to keep every single piece of data? If it's not helping the business, if it's not actively being used, it can be used against you.
Yeah.
And it might even not be a legal thing. Maybe it's just data that, because it's not accessed or thought about, it's not monitored as closely. I've seen clients with very old servers or systems that are archived, that are kept for just in case. But that's an increased, what we call attack surface, things that can be attacked, that can be hit.
Right.
So if that policy defines how much you should be keeping and how, that can really help your security people draw a perimeter around what they're protecting. And it makes it a lot more agile and manageable. The second most important one is probably related to authentication.
Yeah.
Password management or complexity.
Yeah.
And this ties into data because oftentimes your permissions are going to be based around this identity. But why I say this is so important is we need to prove your identity and make sure that the person sitting in the chair on that computer is who they've logged in as.
Yeah.
And it's getting even more complex because sometimes it's the person who accessed their email from a hotel computer or from their phone. I definitely wouldn't say that you should block all of these. People need to be connected in a wider remote world these days.
Right.
But we want to make sure the controls are in there to prove that identity and to monitor it.
And I think one of the things that needs to be spelled out, especially for the audience, is that policies are not merely a statement of a checkbox sort of protection, but their intended use is applicable to the environment which they support. So, for example, policies that are put in play around disaster recovery or remote access usage and other aspects like that are reinforced and should be reinforced within the firewall, within the VPN settings, within the effective nature of the SIM. You know, these particular policies are there to safeguard you within your spam filter, for example. Various rules that you set up and agree upon within the organization need to be reflected within the infrastructure which you support.
Well said.
Yeah. Do you have anything else on your mind?
Really, just don't be afraid to ask questions. I ask them all the time.
Yeah.
Every day I think I understand security, and I find new areas because they're constantly moving the goalposts. The
Right.
landscape's ever-changing, ever-complex. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to go outside your comfort zone. Things are going to change, but we're here to help. Groups that do managed security services are on your side. Our job is to make sure that you can do your normal daily operations and then go home and not think about it.
Well, Alex, thanks again for your time, your brains, and all of that. And thanks again for joining us for our Tech Talks.